Hey, what's up with it, guys? Hey, welcome back to another video. Now, as you can probably tell by the title of this is going to be more of a kind of a constructive, just kind of point after playing many hours on various classes that do have pets. I figured that it would be worthwhile making this video. I just watched Stoop's video, and he was interviewing one of the old game designers from Blizzard, and I thought this might be productive. I'm going to start kind of trying to do these with things to improve or kind of quality of life changes, things not with the intent of making anything stronger or weaker, but kind of fixing things that are kind of eliminating areas where there could be, skillful gameplay that takes place. And hopefully things that are constructive and improving just the overall quality of the game, in hopes that maybe someone from Blizzard actually hears this. So with that being said, when it comes down to the comments and everything down below, be positive, be constructive, don't be super pessimistic or rude to the to the dev team, anything like that. Be really constructive with the feedback that we're getting, and let's kind of work together on putting together as much information as we can to give devs our feedback. Now, I'm going to talk really about two main points here, and this is all specifically related to pet classes, or classes that, pets are an integral part of their DPS. Now, marksman hunters obviously don't have too much of an issue with this because they're having issues with pets, mechanically in raid fights and things like that. They can have no pet and it's fine, and they have a way of avoiding these issues, right? But when it comes to specifically BM and survival, this is a big problem, and it's also very much an issue when you're talking about Demonology Warlocks, which is why I thought this was kind of relevant to post. Now, right now we're on our Survival Hunter. Nothing crazy, 187 eye level, but when you see this, our pet being a tanky tenacity pet, we have the endurance buff as well, has 21k health. In PvE, all things considered, this isn't too problematic. It's a little bit on the squishy side in PvE. There are certain situations when you're doing various, open world content, it's problematic. But when we're talking about PvP, we really start to run into some issues. So for those of you guys that haven't played survival, a big part of your kind of continual utility that you have in higher end arena stuff as a defensive for both yourself or your teammates is Roar of Sacrifice. Now, we start to run into a lot of issues if you actually try and utilize this, partially because of the way the current meta is with cleave comps like, Arms Warriors, Rep Pallies, Boomkins, Windwalkers being so strong, right? All of these classes being able to cleave really effectively. When you then top that on a 20% damage, basically redirection to your pet, and your pet only has 25,000 health, if you're really geared, maybe you're close to that 30,000 health number, your pet can get killed very, very quickly, and at the very least get taken down to about half health, where if a team is paying attention and hard swap to your pet, your healer basically has no way to react, right? And if we're playing a class like a hunter, our only real alternative is something like Mend Pet, and if you're really getting bold, you can use your exhilaration on your pet, but that's kind of arguably a pretty big waste of a defensive cooldown for keeping your pet alive. Now, as a Demonology Warlock, we have Fell Domination helping assist in the resummoning of our pet. But if you're playing something like a Survival Hunter, this is obviously pretty problematic because our only option is to hard cast Revive Pet. It doesn't show up because it takes the same place as Mend Pet. But Revive Pet, which if you're survival and you're in the middle of a bunch of melee combat, it's very, very easy to prevent you from casting Revive Pet, right? If you're BM, I would say this is a little bit easier for you to pull off because more than likely you're kind of pulled back away from the heat of battle. However, it's still a similar situation where it's a long, very telegraphed cast. So when we're talking about competitive PvP situations, it's very, very easy to prevent a hunter from resummoning their pet if you've killed the pet. Now, this basically makes, in the current meta of how things exist right now, Roar of Sacrifice is basically unusable if you're playing against any of these kind of big cleave comps. It's a lot more difficult to actually use this well and keep your pet up and not have to recast Revive Pet. This is a really, really big quality of life change. I've been playing my Survival Hunter a lot since this changed to a melee spec, and it is very noticeable how squishy our pets are currently. Now, you would think, or at least I did initially when you're playing BM, that your pet might be a little bit beefier, right? The pet might have more health, just be a little bit tankier, whatever it may be, and it's really not. your pet's right in the same ballpark when it comes to health, and your DPS is so much more dependent on your pet, it puts BM in a situation that, in my opinion, is virtually unplayable, because if you start playing against any competent players that are aware of these issues, they're going to take advantage of that and completely negate your ability to really deal damage over the course of a game. Now, the reason I think this is an issue and something that we should address is because this is not a high skill cap way of countering a BM or outplaying a BM or a survival hunter or even Demonology Warlock for that matter. Because our pet is so integral to our kit and we have such limited ways of maintaining their health pool and keeping them alive and things like that, it doesn't take a lot of skill to outplay that at all. And it really gimps all of these classes from a performance perspective when you're talking about rated PvP. There's obviously some ways you can try and help optimize keeping your pet alive, but for the most part, teams have to spend very little effort and energy killing your pet to completely give your ability to deal damage. So I would propose in a PvE situation that we have either increased health on our pets or reduced damage taken, especially from indirect spells like Moonfire, Sunfire, these kinds of things are really, really big. Fists of Fury or Blade Storm, the whole Blade Storm Bastion Spear thing. Like if your pet's on top of that, like your pet's almost dead just from that combo. And all of that is unintended damage by these classes. The vast majority of the time, these classes are focusing the players and not the pets, and the pets are getting killed peripherally, and it's completely negating a lot of these classes' ability to perform on a similar level. None of these other classes that are meta right now that are very strong have anything like this that they have to worry from a micromanaging perspective. And even if we do it well, you're not being rewarded for that increased, actions per minute gameplay and the micromanaging of a second, minion throughout the course of any kind of competitive gameplay. So the risk versus reward isn't really right there currently with a lot of these setups. I would argue that Demonology Pet feels a lot stronger. I don't know how much of that is just based on my, more recent familiarity with the spec versus Hunter, for example, but it's very, very noticeable on survival. My pet was dying all the time, every time I'm doing even BGs or whatever, and it's not from people really trying to kill my pet. It's just dying all the time. Now, when we're talking about demonology, I'd say we have a little bit of a different situation, and one kind of additional tweak that I would make. I would say in PvE, Hunter, like I'd mentioned, most of the issues when it comes to the pet stuff are pretty much a non-issue. But I think in PvP, to me, the Hunter pet specs felt much more vulnerable than Demo does, for example. Now, if we're talking about Demonology Warlock, in PvE, we do have a little bit of an issue because Demonology, with Tyrant being a big chunk of our damage, our imps from our hand to Gul'dan, we have no way of reliably redirecting the focus of any of these pets. If you guys have done the raid, you'll know that in the last boss of Castle Nathria, Sire, I think that's his name, let me not mess that up. Sire Denathrius, the ads that are up on the platforms adjacent to where you're fighting, your Dreadstalkers will not actually jump that gap to attack them. Your Vile Fiend will not jump that gap to attack them, and they will actually bug out and sit at the edge of the wall, and we have no way of changing their focus after the ability has been cast. This allows for a lot of really awkward, weird gameplay on that fight, and it's not anything that's intended or any kind of skill gap. It's just something where the pet AI is very finicky. We also have a similar issue when we're talking about the council fight, Council of Blood, where when the bosses jump up to the ledge, they're not technically invulnerable. They take 1 damage per incoming damage, hit, whatever it may be. So you end up losing a lot of damage via your imps just basically attacking and wasting out the balance of their duration on a target that is effectively immune. And then when you have the attendants come in that fight and they make the boss immune, there's no way to prevent your pets from, just going ham on a target that's immune. We have no real control over those aspects of demonology. Those are only a couple fights currently that are kind of coming off the top of my head from a PvE raid kind of perspective, but those are pretty significant because on those 2 fights, I wouldn't say we're necessarily gibbed, but it definitely does hinder our damage output, and we're already playing a spec that's kind of off meta. I would propose something like a refocusing button that's off the global cooldown, similar to how like Windwalkers, I believe, have this when they summon Zwen. You can like re-click the button again and it will refocus Zwen if you're switching targets. Something that would basically change the target of all of our peripheral ads. It wouldn't need to be per, Dreadstalkers and Vile Fiend. They wouldn't all need to be different. You could have it all be focused on one, but this would add a lot of control. Whether it's able to be macroed into other abilities or not, but some way of refocusing the attention of our pets. That way, when high priority ads come up, we have the ability to actually swap to these ads, and we're not hurt from a DPS perspective when there's situations where there's random invulnerabilities or mechanics. Oh, this is another good example. This fight right before this, Stone Legion Generals, it's a similar situation. When one of the bosses goes, they take like 99% reduced damage. You can't prevent your pets from just attacking on that. So if you get, off your timing with a Tyrant, or half of your Tyrant is up during that invulnerability or 99% damage reduction phase, it really makes it hard for you to perform. I think that a redirection button, similar to like I'm mentioning with the Windwalker being able to redirect their Zwen, would be something that's like a reasonable, realistic solution to that. That kind of takes me into PvP. You have a similar situation when you're talking about minions in PvP not being able to change their focus if you do decide that you want to hard swap to a different target. And we have a similar issue when it comes to what I was mentioning regarding hunters. I would say, like I mentioned before, Demo seems to be a little bit tankier when it comes to this, but because of the souling passive, we can have similar issues on these really high cleave comps because we basically have Aurora Sacrifice aspect baked into just our passive. The reason I think they feel tankier is in PvP, the vast majority of the time, you're going to be running Demon Skin, and this passive Absorb Shield, passive heal is very noticeable, especially over long games, and really adds a lot of passive survivability. I don't know if it would be feasible to add something similar to Hunters when we're talking about PvP, or if that would even be a big enough improvement. I know Survival's Mastery kind of is like a weaker version of this, or, the shield aspect of this is really huge, and I don't know how much of that is really contributing to the pet survivability or not, but I would also propose some kind of a reduced damage taken by minions in PvP situations because the pet dying, like I mentioned, is problematic. I would say at least with Demonology, we have the ability to have Fell Domination, and we have a conduit that we can run to help with that increased, resummoning and make it not so much of an issue. But point being is, if you're playing Demo and your pet gets killed, you're basically got your hands tied. And if classes are able to do that without really even intentionally killing your pet via like a Blade Storm, Kyrian, Mortal Strike, Cleave from a Warrior, and Fist of Fury, and, Moonfire, Sunfire, it ends up just feeling really bad. And like I said, the biggest peeve I have with all those situations is that they're not intended, or they're not being a priority of the team that you're playing against, and they're killing your pet and completely hindering you most of the time unintentionally as just like an added bonus to whatever they're doing from a rotational perspective, and it feels really bad. So those are the kind of couple things. Just to recap, I would say with hunters, either increasing the overall health pool and tankiness of their pets, or reducing the damage they take significantly in PvP, as they are at a bigger handicap when it comes to resummoning the pet, in the middle of a game, especially I would say with BM, because BM it's so important. Survival, it's very similar too, though. It's still a pretty integral part of your gameplay, still pretty high percentage of your damage done in most arena games. And then in PvE, when we come to Warlocks, having an ability to redirect the focus of your minions that are not your Felguard, just a simple button that would refocus the aggro onto whichever target you had selected off of the global cooldown. So this could be macroed in or baked in with other, pet attack slash things like a minion attack / minion attack, or some other way that you'd have a similar way of directing the focus of those targets, not micromanaging them to any extent, but being able to redirect their focus so that they're not wasting a bunch of abilities and cast times on immune targets or attacking the wrong target. And then in PvP, a similar thing regarding the tankiness as it relates to cleave type damage. Fist of Fury, Blade Storm, the Bastion, Spear thing from Warriors, Moonfire, Sunfire, those kind of all the big AoE cleave dots that are just doing so much damage to all the pets currently. Hopefully you guys agree with me. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think about this. But these are the few things after kind of thinking on this for a few days that I think would be really, really big improvements, quality life improvements. They would not be viewed as being overpowered or too strong. I don't think after any of these changes would potentially be made that any of these classes would be too strong and dominate the meta. I think it's just things that would help improve and bring them up to the level from a competitive perspective to these other classes that are so strong currently. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Sorry to keep this so long. I just really wanted to be thorough with my thought process behind all that stuff. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.